Hey, what's up guys? I'm Matt from Politico, and I wanted to make a video today talking about Turkey. More specifically, how over the past 10 years, under current President Erdogan, Turkey is heading down a dangerous path towards autocracy, which diverges from their history of being a secular and democratic state. Now, what you just saw was footage taken in May where anti-Erdogan protesters were viciously attacked. The thugs were kicking people while they were down and even chasing them around the park as police and Secret Service struggled to get a handle on the situation. Now, this shocked many people, and that something like this could happen on U.S. soil, but if you look at the president of Turkey's behavior in his own country, it's actually anything but surprising. To tell you the truth, Erdogan has been sending goons to quash protests for a while now. For example, in 2013, the Gezi Park protests swelled to about 3 million people across the country, and protesters concerned with things like freedom of assembly and freedom of the press were met with water cannons and tear gas. So any authoritarian hopeful is going to need a base, and Erdogan's party, the Justice and Development Party, or AKP, is built in the tradition of a more moderate Islamism. This scares many secularists in Turkey because the president has actually taken concrete steps to Islamize the country. Steps like building thousands of new mosques, just like this new one in his new presidential palace, and reading Quranic verses on parliament steps or presidential valleys. It is worrisome because when countries start to move towards Islamization, things like women and gay rights start to come under pressure. But there's an even more harrowing trend if you ask the opposition in Turkey, that it isn't just building impressive architecture. The Center for American Progress put out a report that there has been a vast expansion of the Imam Hatip religious school system, or faith schools in Turkey. As they write, quote, enrollment in these schools increased nearly 15-fold since Erdogan's party took power. Now, there are people who draw parallels to, in the United States, we have Catholic schools, but there are some important differences. The first being that these schools in Turkey are many times being funded by the state, so yes, taxpayers. Now, I went to Catholic school for 12 years, and it was private. We spent about 45 minutes to an hour every day learning about religion, but according to the original mission statement of these Imam Hatip schools, the goal is to prepare each student to be a religious scholar or imam. That's something entirely different than learning the Beatitudes. So the process of Islamization has been ongoing since Erdogan took power. But after the attempted coup of last year, allegedly launched by his ideological rival Fethullah Gulen, he's found a good excuse to expedite that process and tighten the noose around Turkey's democracy. If you don't remember, on July 15th of last year, a group of military officials launched a coup over some of these fears to try and wrestle power away from the AKP. They bombed the General National Assembly, took over the television studio, and tanks rolled through the streets of Ankara and Istanbul. This prompted Erdogan to get on his iPhone and beg his supporters to take back their democracy, aka protest the coup, and that's exactly what they did. Erdogan won that night, and the failure of the coup started the purge or crackdown we've been witnessing all year. Now, the crackdown has been sweeping up thousands of individuals on trumped-up charges like links to terrorism and anti-state activity. For example, the arrest of military and political opponents, 7,400 civil servants, some human rights activists, and even 28,000 teachers. The scariest part, however, is that Turkey is now ranked #1 in the world for jailing journalists. According to the Committee for the Protection of Journalists, Turkey accounts for nearly 1/3 of the global total, coming in at 81, which is more than Russia and China combined. If one thing is clear, destroying journalism is how democracy dies. So what? Erdogan is building more mosques and parents are sending their kids to religious schools. Well, if the locking up of journalists doesn't worry you enough, and it should, the referendum vote that recently took place in Turkey should. The referendum was meant to solidify Erdogan's power through institutions, or as the New York Times put it, the constitutional change will allow the winner of the 2019 presidential election to assume full control of the government, ending the current parliamentary system. The referendum went in Erdogan's favor, winning 51 to 48%, and if you look at the map to see where the votes are coming from, the cultural and liberal centers where the major cities are, like Istanbul, Ankara, and the Kurdish southeast, voted no, while the countryside, quotes, voted yes. Again, Erdogan playing to the religious identity of the people in the countryside of Turkey worked out in his favor. This is a big deal, and I think it's a way bigger deal than people seem to think it is, because within the past 15 years, we have essentially witnessed, or are witnessing, the de-democratization of a country that was once on the cusp of joining the EU and one of the healthier secular states in the Middle East. A NATO member is now slipping down the slope of authoritarianism That's often way too common in the Middle East. No doubt a huge loss. Alright guys, that's it for me. I hope you learned something. If you did, you can like, comment, subscribe, and go check me out on Twitter at Politico. Thanks for watching.